All right, we are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'm going to be addressing the rest of all of the events in Week 13. So, to start things out with Sunday action and get into the games that I watched from there first, starting with Steelers Bills, or at least part of it. I didn't watch the entire game live, but I was tracking it the whole way, and it felt a little bit convincing for a second. Neither quarterback or offense, for that matter, was really playing all that great, to be completely honest with you. But we were still at a stalemate for quite some time. Per the usual for the Steelers this season, though, their offense, despite having the defense, at least in the passing attack, hold up for this much time, they kept on getting themselves in short drives. Time and time and time again, they could not move the football. And not to mention, with all what I didn't see in this game, oh man, they were fucking Aaron Rodgers up. They were fucking his ass up. I mean, goodness gracious. Like, they flash back to one of the plays from earlier, and he's out here rocking a bloody, beaten up fucking nose after getting powerbombed into the fucking dirt. He had to get helped up. I mean, it's not that hard if you're the Bills defenders to get a hold of Aaron Rodgers once you get the pressure on him. But this is the same story for what has been atrocious offensive line play for this Pittsburgh team this year. And it gets even worse than that, because that's to be expected at this point. They've gotten accustomed to this now, and maybe they're just not going to break out of that identity anytime soon. But whatever the hell is going on with the defense has to be checked out, because, dude, oh my gosh, like, at the point that I got put back into the ball game, they just continued it. They were already up 16-7 at this point, and the Steelers, when it came to trying to stop the run, they couldn't. They kept the Bills gashing them up and down the fucking field throughout the game. Ray Davis run after Ray Davis run would follow, and ultimately, you got one graphic displayed stating that the Steelers to this point had already given up the most rushing yards to an opponent in the Acrisure/Heinz field in that history of that structure. And it only got worse. They also allowed Josh Allen to eventually get into the end zone from 8 yards out to get his NFL record-setting 76 rushing touchdown for a quarterback. Then, to make matters even worse, as they continued to just pummel them into submission through the ground, the Steelers would then proceed to break a team-wide mark and give up the most rushing yards to a single opponent in their franchise history in about 50 years, since 1975. Like, come on, man. That is just fucking dog shit defense. And then one of the Steelers' defensive linemen had the nerve, this Otamewo guy, I don't even know who that is. He had the nerve to get in a lineman's face and try to talk shit. And it's like, dude, you can't possibly get away with doing that right now. If you had that much intensity trying to stop the fucking run on the football field, well, you wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. And not to mention, too, that with a couple of the developments I would have mentioned here, both Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, both of their tackles on the outside were out in this game. They weren't playing. And this Bills offense still proceeded to, with guys being called up on short notice, completely dominate the time of possession in this ball game. Like, yes, the Steelers' offense is somewhat non-existent, but you still can't excuse the Bills having a 24-minute damn near advantage on you in time of possession. And the Steelers' offense was also held under 200 total yards, with just 108 passing yards through the air. Again, not to say that they didn't handle Josh Allen well themselves, but man, when it came to the rushing attack, the Steelers, on the other hand, could not match the intensity at all. At all. I mean, you look at the Bills as a whole, they had 249 yards on the ground and a touchdown amongst all their rushers on almost 5 yards a carry. Meanwhile, the Steelers ran the ball just 19 times and averaged just 3.1 yards per carry. And they believed that was going to get the job done in a game like this. Like, the passing was insignificant at that point. The Bills didn't even really need it. They would try, but after a while, they just settled for the notion that, okay, if you're giving us the rushing lanes, you're giving us the free gaps to exploit, well, we're just going to go and do that. There's no reason for us to try to play the game that you want us to play. No, we're going to take that shit from you. We're going to control the narrative in this game. And we are going to absolutely dominate you at the line of scrimmage. And that's exactly what they did in this one. It was absolutely embarrassing. Like, that comes without me even watching the entirety of the game. That's a problem. Like, oh my goodness. Dude. Crazy, man. I will say, for the Steelers, Peyton Wilson had 13 tackles in this game at least, but that defense would have even more questions surrounding them. Mike Tomlin would have even more questions being hurled his way. Inevitably, of course. I mean, it's so crazy to know that the Steelers will lose this one 26-7. I mean, yes, it was probably a foregone conclusion. Well, I won't say that. I won't do them like that, but I do think the Bills would have won this game regardless. That's what I was thinking before this game even went down. But, like, to get completely bullied around like this, when you have a chance to prove yourself against a team still looking to contend for a playoff spot in the AFC, it just tells you exactly where this team's mindset is at. Championship contenders yet against a team who could be considered a championship contender in virtually any other situation. You don't even put up a good enough fight throughout the entirety of the game. They literally just took your lunch money and bought whatever the hell they wanted to with it at that rate. But you have the nerve to try to fight somebody after it's already done. Like, no, that's not how it works. Got bigger problems to worry about as well. With as terrible as the game was on Thanksgiving night, the Ravens have now reclaimed the top record, I should say, top ranking in the AFC North standings. And there are a ton of divisional games against those two teams, and also the Bengals being involved here left. So it makes for a very weird division race out of one considered to be, when every team is at the peak of their powers, one of the best in the NFL. The road only gets tougher from there for this team, so anything is really possible. Like, everybody's proclaiming this to be Aaron Rodgers' last ride, potentially, and on the one hand, there have been other reports coming out stating that the Steelers actually want him to stay for another season. I don't know about that, especially if you're putting him through this shit right now, because in the moment, this is an incredibly rocky ride if you've ever seen one. And that's all going down before some recent basketball news, but I'll save that for then. yeah, just completely got their asses whooped in one of the more demoralizing fashions. I mean, all they had to do was just put you in a chokehold, doing every single maneuver you can to break out of it, and they just could not. Like James Cook III, for crying out loud, had a career-high 32 rushing attempts and 144 yards on the ground. Even with a fumble leading to a Steelers score, if I'm not mistaken, they still trusted him enough. To continue to rely on him. And he did not fail them. Craziness, man. All right, moving on to the Sunday Night Football game between the Broncos and the Commanders. I was appalled by just the matchup on paper when it was first promoted. Because the Commanders were probably not expected to win the game, but the way that the Broncos have also played their lesser competition across a large portion of the year would make you really question whether or not they might actually come out with a convincing win that quells the noise. And it's safe to say that this would shape out to be a pretty interesting game, all things considered. I mean, firstly, the Broncos' calling card is their defense. In fact, before the game even started, they showed graphics stating that they were on pace to break the single-season team record for sacks, with 72 being the record held by the 84 Bears right now. They were also the only team in the NFL this season to have 3 players with at least 6 sacks in Nik Bonitto, Jonathan Cooper, and Zach Allen. It's been inevitable for them all season long, even with the offense having those, we can't even call them rough stretches. They go through entire slumps. But that defense is a championship level defense. And you are going to consistently be in ball games when they're out on the field. I'll put it like this, though. For most of this first half, when you look at it from the Broncos' perspective, even though they had the lead, even though they held Washington to just a touchdown, and even though they did force an interception on Marcus Mariota, and that was just with him doing some stupid shit. I mean, he literally scrambles over to the left side, okay, and he throws a fucking jump pass for no reason into an area surrounded with multiple Broncos bodies. And Dre Greenlaw lurks his ass and gets it. That was just one of the stupidest plays you could have had there. Outside of that shit, though, the defense, and especially their pass rush, was actually not that intense in this game. For most of the first half, they had a graphic that mentioned it, and I think this got all the way down to at some point in the third quarter at least. Naturally, they would ramp it up then, but still, through that point, the Broncos had a 5% pressure rate per one of the graphics from the broadcast, and that was the lowest for any team in any game in the year. Crazily enough, they gave Marcus Mariota a fair amount of time to make some decisions. He just was not the best at making decisions earlier in the game. And I will say as well that for the Commanders, what worked to their advantage especially was their ability to get a few explosive runs. Just multiple effort plays throughout that half from both Chris Rodriguez Jr. and also Jeremy McNichols just getting solid runs by bouncing off of would-be tacklers consistently and picking up 10-yard chunks. In fact, their 4 total 10-plus yard runs in the first half was also the most in a single game that the Broncos had allowed to this point. So it wasn't like the Broncos were running away with this thing. Like, they were getting a true fight from this team in a way. And, like, that's just a good representation of what the Commanders team could be. Of course, they're not at full strength, and you have to commend them still going out and putting up this kind of fight. And man, it would get even better for them. You know, it was a 6-point ball game, but the way they started out that third quarter would break the internet a little bit, I would think. Because you had them push their way down there, man. Zach Ertz was fucking balling, all right? Just consistently being the reliable target that he's been for most of his career. And Mariota was actually starting to find him a little bit. Then you also had Terry McLaurin log a catch for one of the first times in his return from injury as well to get them in goal-to-go territory. Eventually, they tried to impose their will with a few shorter plays. But the Broncos defense, being as good as they have been, especially in the red zone, they would snuff them out. But on third down, from the 5-yard line, Mariota decided to throw it up. Nothing like a clean fade route, you know? And no one could have expected who would be on the receiving end of this catch. And who would make it. You want to talk about a poster? Put Treylon Burks' one-handed snag with the nose of the football from short distance as he uses his other hand to stave off Riley Moss falling back in the corner end zone like this for the lead. Instantly, it was compared to Odell Beckham Jr.'s catch. I mean, it's fitting. This is on Sunday Night Football. You have the same 2 people on the call at the exact same moment that specific play happened in 2014. They're both wearing the same number 13. A lot of parallels there. Even OBJ had to give Burks some respect. Like, who would have thought that Burks, a man who had already gotten punted away from the Titans earlier this season because they didn't think he was a good enough player to last for them, is now coming to Washington and just randomly making a play like that? This is his first touchdown catch since 2022. And only the second in his NFL career. And I'm like, hey, that's a damn great way to get back into the end zone again. I don't know how consistent it would be for him, but that just adds another interesting wrinkle to things. Bo Nix was not to be denied, especially when it comes to one of his first touchdown passes. Man literally gets tripped up or trips himself up, and he fucking, while in a fucking baseball throw stance, has himself and his legs parallel to the fucking ground in a sliding motion, and he rocketed a pass over to Cortland Sutton on an inbreaker for a touchdown there. Eventually, he would get right back to getting his blend of checkdowns and, you know, crossing routes in and over to one Pat Bryant II before having RJ Harvey punch it in virtually unaccounted for, which made no sense, especially with the way the Commanders guarded the rushing attack all night long. You see, the Broncos even if they tried to impose their will with volume, were held virtually ineffective on the ground and were made to be somewhat one-dimensional. So I just don't understand how in a situation like that, you'd been containing them that well, yet you crumble at the very point of attack. I just don't really understand. That made no sense to me whatsoever. But it would only heat up in the fourth quarter. Even if Bo Nix wants to have all these short routes to rely on and things like that, he still made a decision here to test a man in Bobby Wagner, who's legitimately one of the best linebackers of this generation. And it just so happened to be the case that right after this, they mentioned that he is about to get a degree from Howard in a matter of a couple weeks. So you're playing with that man's mind like that. He wasn't fooled. He didn't have to really move too much at all. Like, he read him the whole way, and he just made the routine interception. Luckily for the Broncos, that didn't lead to much of anything immediately outside of a Jake Moody field goal. Yes, Jake Moody, after beating the Bears on a game-winning field goal earlier in the season on Monday Night Football in Washington, is now back in this stadium with the Commanders. Crazy stuff. You just got a long, drawn-out quarter. Broncos could not get that put-away drive. And the Commanders, while their defense was holding up for the most part, chance after chance after chance slipped them by because of their inability to convert on crucial downs. But that would change on what would be a fortuitous and fairly strenuous field goal drive. Like, they had to run out the entire 3-minute time to make it happen. And they were pushed back almost pretty early in the cycle after already overcoming a fourth down conversion here. This drive could have ended pretty easily for the Broncos defense, with them backing them all the way up to a 3rd and 25. Yet, when Mariota had to make a few plays, he put it on his shoulder. He got the ball in the right places, and all of a sudden, before you knew it, even with him managing to get a run out of bounds, the Commanders had a chance to go and win the whole damn thing if they wanted to approach it that way. They only had time, though, with 12 seconds left and no timeouts. They probably had a couple of shots in them, which is exactly what they would end up doing. And neither of them would come to any benefit for them. But you were in range. All you needed to do was rely on Jake Moody. He would make it, and the game would go to overtime, weirdly enough. So, with that, in just a matter of a few plays on that drive, Evan Ingram hauled ass down the field and actually caught the football. There was some inexplainable situations from him in this game. Like, these catches were there for the taking, hitting them in the hands, and it just lets them slip right through. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But at least he got that one, turned right upfield, and utilized his world-class speed at the tight end position to get them deeper into the red zone before R.J. Harvey once again banged his head on the goalpost, virtually untouched, for a score. It was going to be on the Commanders to have a response in them. And at that point, you're thinking early, well, the goal is to go down there and score. And it's like, if you do, it's probably creeping in the back of your mind that you want to go for 2. You have nothing left to lose this season. It already looks as though it's going to be over. You may as well try to play spoiler if you can. It wouldn't go so perfectly, though. They were bailed out by a very weird and stupid Talanoa Hufanga play It's like, that's the interesting thing about it when you look at the Broncos too. Mentioned that they were the most penalized defense in the league, and it hasn't really affected them all that much. But there were a couple of head-scratching plays on their side of the football like that just truly could have changed everything about this. And it eventually led to the Commanders finding it within themselves to get down the field. Raleigh Moss had provided solid coverage for most of the night, despite getting mossed by Traylon Burks. But he would allow Deebo Samuel Sr. to get past him on a double move and get down in goal-to-go territory. Man, look, man. When Terry McLaurin on 4th and goal sealed up that motherfucking touchdown catch, I know Commanders fans were on cloud 9. But there was a job that still had to be done, and you could go out there and win this game, realistically speaking. The play set up fine. Mac Nichols was open out of the backfield. But when it came down to it, they left them unblocked, and you fucked around with the athleticism of Nik Bonitto off the edge. You paid for it. Got the massive deflection to seal the game and give the Broncos the 27-26 victory in overtime. Say what you want about them continuously getting away with a lot of different shit like this over the course of the year, but you can't deny it. They're 10-2. They're one of the top seeds in the AFC, and even though this might not be the strongest win for them, you keep stacking them up. And honestly, the advantage that they have on most other teams in the AFC West right now, like I'm pretty sure by far they are the clear leaders in that division. Like it's, not going to take them too much more, I think, depending on how things are. Okay, so when seeing this, okay, they do have at least the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Chargers one more time. Like, it ain't over, but, like, they could come away easily as one of the top 2 teams in that division. Like, you're just going to have to make sure to adjust your game in those situations, of course. As for the numbers here, Bo Nix had 321 yards and a touchdown and an interception on 64.4% completion. Evan Engram had 79 receiving yards on 6 catches. Cortland Sutton had 5 receptions and 62 yards and a touchdown. Adam Trautman had 3 receptions for 47 yards. And Pat Bryant II had 3 receptions for 42 yards. As for the Commanders, Marcus Mariota had 294 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and an interception. He played fine, but 56% completion might be underwhelming, and he also threw a career-high 50 pass attempts. Do with that what you will. The team as a whole, Commanders, 143 rushing yards, 4.3 yards per carry on the ground. Like, that's pretty damn solid against this unit. It just, when it came time for it, they had to rely on the passing attack. And they got close. Like, they played them as well as they could. So you have to give them all the credit here. It still just was not enough. They were somewhat outmatched, if you can say. Zach Ertz had 10 receptions for 106 yards. Terry McLaurin had 7 receptions for 96 yards and a touchdown. And Deebo Samuel Sr. had 5 receptions for 64 yards. Talanoa Hufanga, again, they mentioned over the entire game, they were looking at some of the tape, like he is truly a great safety. He can line up all over the place. And he was making a number of different plays in this game. Along with Alex Singleton getting a clutch deflection on Zach Ertz to cap off one of the Commanders' drives before they ended up scoring the game-tying field goal in regulation. And that was his first game since the events that transpired with his health and being diagnosed with testicular cancer. So, like, that's just, tremendous stuff all around. But Hufanga is very much capable of being one of the better safeties in the NFL. That's definitely known at this point. So to have him get into some of those random penalties like that and damn near hurt the team in those situations is like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? Like, come on, man. There's no way. You are probably expected to do way more than that. And then, oh boy, like this, even in a condensed form, this is probably going to be late. So let's address the Pats and the Giants real quick. Yeah, that was a Monday Night Football game, and this was one of the first times that these two teams ended up facing off against each other in quite some time. Yes, head to head. The game of absolute doom on November 26th in 2023, in that 10-7 disaster that I keep on bringing up because I can't get that shit out of my mind. Safe to say, it wasn't even that close. It wasn't. Like the Patriots all around, we figured that they were going to be the better team in this game. I don't think that shocked anybody. I don't think it shocked people that a blowout could be imminent when you have a team as strong as this going up against another team in the Giants who, amongst all the dysfunction, they are also missing multiple pieces that make them exponentially better than they are right now. So they're already weakened at that point. It wasn't going to be pretty. But even by that standard, oh my goodness, man. Like, all three phases of the game, outside of one Andres Borregales miss, all three phases for the Pats were clicking in this one. Man, the offense was rolling. You got solid contributions on the ground, even from Ramondre Stevenson getting some more inclusion in the offense. Now, if that comes with any trust, I'm not too sure about that. But hey, you never know. You had Keyshawn Boutte in Kyle Williams, the rookie, getting vertical on multiple occasions, getting down the field and getting touchdown scores, both of them, while mossing defenders in the end zone. The special teams was electric. But what else do you expect from a man in Marcus Jones, who happens to be one of the better slot corners in the NFL as well? They punted it deep to him, and they ended up making a brutal mistake, as that would end up leading to a fucking 94-yard punt return for a touchdown. Jamie Gillen was the last man out there to prevent it. He didn't stand a fucking chance at all. Way too fast for that. So you had the special teams going to work. But how about that damn defense? Because as all of this is going down, the most important point, stated so eloquently by Corey Durden, 17-0, fuck nigga. 17-0 at the end of the first quarter. In fact, it was a 30-7 ball game at the end of the half. Like, it was over right then and right there. Everything else that happened afterwards was filler. Between them having the great coverage on the back end for majority of this game, even if Gonzalez and Davis III might have got a few times. More often than not, man, they were sticking right with the receivers. Spillane continues to be a fucking tackling beast. You already knew that. With him now being under Mike Vrabel's system. Like, the man is going to be unlocked to do whatever it is he's got to do on any given night, and he's more than likely going to produce. I think it was mentioned. Hold on. Because just want to make sure about that. Okay, no. Even without Milton Williams being in this game, why did I think he was back in this game? I don't know. Nevertheless, those front four guys were just getting after it the entire time, making their presences felt when it mattered. Like, by that point, even with Devin Singletary getting a fucking rushing touchdown from like 22 yards out or something, that shit didn't end up mattering all that much. It truly didn't. That's what it is. That is full garbage time. And they just completely ran them out of the building. But now you have to look at it from the Giants' perspective as well. And I mean, the main thing is, between Jackson Dart literally telling Laura Rutledge or some, essentially, that you can't keep a dog down forever or something like that. And them also showing a graphic stating that he had already suffered the second most hits in the NFL this season for any quarterback while throwing or running the football. The second most, and he's a rookie who has not played in every single game this season. And you want to know what kind of shit happens early on the drive. They fucking hit stick the shit out of this man. Harold Landry II Landry III rather, already getting free shots at the man as he pleases. That is not a great look. And that would only set up even more disaster. Christian Ellis is a name that Giants fans probably will not forget. Jackson Dart is a great scrambler. He's being advised to run the ball a little less, but he also attributed to Laura Rutledge that, hey, this is the best part of his game. If he has the mobility, he's going to want to take advantage of it. Fair enough. But in the pursuit of trying to get extra yardage, Christian Ellis wasn't going to let that shit happen. He smacked him right out of bounds. It was a legal hit, but it felt so fucking powerful. You could hear the shit through the TV. He got popped. And that was the identity of the Pats defense in this game. That's what they've been trying to impose the entire season. That is some physicality that you want to see when the going gets tough. And when we get into the full grit and grind of this last stretch of the season, heading into postseason play, that is going to be the separator. And if you're going to have that intensity now and keep it then, you're doing the right thing. But Theo Johnson and other Giants teammates, including Michael Schmitz Jr. on the sideline, they wouldn't take too kindly to it. I guess they have a right to. It's their quarterback. They're going to want to protect their guy. But it wasn't a dirty hit at all. And they proceed to just go after him the entire time, try to grab a hold of him, punch him up a little bit. He clearly didn't learn his lesson. He would proceed to decapitate Gunnar Olszewski and get him out of the ballgame with a concussion. He literally scraped part of the end sticker off of the helmet with the hit. They're just flying all over the fucking place, man. But that's just been the story of the year for the Giants. Like, there is something fundamentally wrong with that. Yes, Jackson Dart is making the decision to run the football in these situations. But you are still showcasing that even when you have the means to protect the guys you have on the field, you simply can't and don't enough. It makes no sense. It has been the theme of their entire year. And it's no surprise when you have that going down, you have a result like this. They were always going to be overmatched in this game, but at the very least, like, something, anything, consistent to break through. And instead, for most of this game, you literally got crickets from this offense. It wasn't all their fault, though. Because to put even more icing on the cake on what was already a 33-15 win for the Pats, you also had one of the weirdest ever plays, gaffes in NFL history. I'm probably going to say that's definitely a recency bias, but anytime I see a man in Young Way Cool, all right, anytime I see this man lining up to kick the football and he stubbed his fucking pointer toe in the ground before it even hits the ball, he already fucked up. I'm not a kicker. I'm no expert at this. But he already fucked up by having part of his left leg already be past the hole. That's definitely going to throw you off a little bit. But, man, you could not make that shit. He stubs it in the ground, and he's falling back like this. Gillen has no other choice to pick up the ball and try to make something out of it. And poor punter guy, they crushed his ass in the backfield promptly. Story of the game, bro. All three phases. And even then, you just have the Giants playing into their hands. Like, seriously, nobody prompted him to do that. His fucking controller just glitched out or something. I don't know how to describe that shit. Will we see that again? Shit, maybe. But, again, like, when you have broadcasters even saying, they've never seen some shit like that before. That's a problem. That's a serious issue. Getting into the numbers a little bit. Drake May with 282 passing yards and 2 touchdowns on 77.4% completion. He is definitely trying to raise up the rankings in the MVP race. Travion Henderson would have 11 rushes for 67 yards. And Hunter Henry would have 4 receptions for 73 yards. As for the Giants, Jackson Dart in a clean pocket actually didn't really play that bad. 139 yards on 70.8% completion and a touchdown. But again, just too many slow-paced drives. And way too many hits, man. Like, damn. All right, though. As a team, the Giants would run for 111 yards on the ground as well. A few historical things here. The Giants would allow a passing touchdown with multiple in this game by Drake May in each of their first 13 ball games for the first time in their franchise history since 1972. Meanwhile, the Patriots will become the first team since the 1999 Colts to post at least a 10-game winning streak after losing more than 13 in the previous season. Crazy enough, man. Like, it is wild to see that they have bounced back as a franchise so quickly. Like, it all went to shit. It all went to shit the moment that Tom Brady left that organization. And they had been in a slump for years. 4 years. Meanwhile, somehow, some way, they saw a vision going back to the draft last year. They tried to give Gerard Mayo a shot, and that obviously didn't pan out. But through it all, they've now reached this point. Pretty sure they are the top seed in the AFC, and they are on a fucking roll. Like, jeez, you just have to respect that. But that'll do it for all the game action that I watched. And now, as briefly as possible, I'm going to try to address all the other games in reasonable fashion. I will start out with my Seahawks, but honestly, there isn't much to say. I'm really trying not to be biased here. I'm really trying not to. And in that, I have to be completely fair. In that, this was not a bad game for the Vikings defense. In fact, in any other case, in any other situation, with at least a competent quarterback, I know that consistently talking about the quarterback this, the quarterback that, they are not, they're going to lead the team, but they are not every single component of the team. Fair enough. I get that. They held the Seahawks offense, at least through the air, in check. Their goal, even without watching the game and, getting a few highlights of it in post, it looked like their game plan was to try to take out the Jackson Smith and Jigba equation. And for the most part, they did succeed in doing that, holding him to a season-low 2 receptions for 23 yards. Meanwhile, their pass rush, especially Dallas Turner, the amount of fucking times that I just look at the fucking play-by-play and I see that this nigga sacked fucking Sam Darnold and also forced a sack fumble on him at some point. Like, they were getting back there and making plays time and again on the Seahawks offense and completely nullifying them to the fact where they did not score a single touchdown offensively until the fourth quarter. Just think about that for a second. In any other situation, with the right ingredients in play, the Vikings would at least have gotten on the board, would have at least been making this game somewhere within a couple possessions, keeping it close throughout the way. Instead, to build off the sack fumble that Dallas Turner forced, the Vikings desperately need a quarterback. They desperately need one. Only time will tell if they are right in not thinking that Sam Darnold was their guy by moving on from him in the offseason. And again, they played him well. They did not allow him to do anything. They would know it better than anybody else with the way that he ended off the season last year. They sent relentless pressure at him, and he could not handle it. They held him to just around 50% completion and only 128 passing yards. But they have such a gaping hole at that position, and it's not hard to see, especially when you have J.J. McCarthy go out. They call up the undrafted man out of New Hampshire and Minnesota in Max Brosmer. And yes, they may have been overmatched regardless against what is a great Seahawks defense. And they handled their fucking business. They did exactly what they needed to do. No, I'm not a fantasy guy all the way. I play it. It does not overly drive my passion or, I guess, drive to really immerse myself into these ball games because I'm just doing that naturally. But in playing fantasy football, just because, Yo, I saw that in some leagues, the Seahawks defense put up as much as 32.5 as a defensive unit. Insanity. Between a number of sacks that they forced and also just Max Brosmer proceeding to pull off with me already mentioning a terrible gaffe in NFL history from Younghoe Koo. He's getting sacked and muscled down to the ground by DeMarcus Lawrence. Yes, they were trying to go for it on fourth down, and they're well within their right. You force a turnover, I don't care what the situation is. You want to try to make them pay for it. Fair enough. You're in close proximity. You have a chance to get yourself on the board. Like, that's fair game. Instead, not only do you come away with nothing, because the Seahawks completely locked that play up, you have Max Brosmer still trying to get the ball out and make something out of nothing. And Ernest Jones, the fourth, came in from the fucking rafters and picked that shit off for an 85-yard pick six. Not to mention, he would get an interception later in the ball game as well for a 2-interception ball game. Yo, Tariq Woolen had himself an interception in this game. I saw it. Even he still fumbled the football back to the Vikings offense, and they still didn't do anything. It's not incredibly shocking that they didn't come away with much of anything. Like, this is an undrafted quarterback making his first start on relatively short notice, while not really having enough reps with a load of first-team guys. This was to be expected in a way. And, I mean, although the Vikings' rushing attack was somewhat all right, it needed to be a lot stronger for them to compete in this one. And it just wasn't. You force Brosmer to have to make some pretty risky decisions for a first start in the league, and he just simply couldn't handle it. But there are some things in which just are inexcusable. Yeah, Jackson Smith and Jigba did have a season low, but we understand that he's probably going to be okay. Well, in this game, Justin Jefferson was a non-factor. And in a series in which last year, this is a man who had a game-winning touchdown catch against the Seahawks unit in Seattle. Because this was also a home game for the Seahawks. That happened just last year, with Sam Darnold at the helm, of course. But he's definitely capable of imposing his will as a dynamic wide receiver, as one of the top wide receivers in the league like he is, against this defense. And he was a ghost. Now, that could be for a number of different reasons. That might have been the coverage on him. But also, Brosmer, again, without really having that connection, might not have a sense of how to truly get him the football. One way or another. 2 receptions for 4 yards, a career low in both for Justin Jefferson, is absolutely unacceptable. There is no place for something like that to happen. It is a crime. I mean, geez, bro. That's bad. Man, I got a whole hell of a lot to figure out there, man. All right. Moving on to the Falcons and the Jets. I don't know what the fuck this game was. I don't know. I don't know, man. I want so hard to understand, but I can't. Like, Bijan Robinson is going to be Bijan Robinson, and he had another tremendous day at the office from scrimmage. In fact, he had another 150-yard game from scrimmage, and his total over the course of the season leads the league. He got himself a touchdown score in this game as well. That was going to be a given for Atlanta. But in a game full of just weird developments, nothing was going to come easy for either squad. No, they really had to try to duke this out and see which team would fold quicker. Like, they did have a decent back and forth. And if uncertainty's a thing for you, how about Adonai Mitchell? Yeah, AD Mitchell getting deep for a 52-yard receiving touchdown. Followed up promptly by 2 missed field goals because, yes. But hey, maybe both kickers understand what they're doing, and yet with short fields, could not and refused to get touchdowns. The Jets were literally at the 15-yard line, and they only muster up a single yard of offense en route to having to settle for a field goal before Falcons would drive back down the field themselves and get the football over to former quarterback David Sills V for a receiving touchdown. To add yet another layer to this. But hey, the Jets did have a response. You know, it took a little while for Tyrod Taylor to understand it, but hey, when it comes to bridge quarterbacks, let me tell you something about Tyrod Taylor, man. He's going to find a way to keep you in ball games at least. And every now and then, he'll play above his role and he'll win you one. I think Buffalo fans understand that a lot better than most fan bases. Even Ravens fans, to an extent, understand that he's that caliber of quarterback in some spurts, all right? And his efforts would not only get him in the end zone for a 10-yard rushing touchdown on one drive, but would also help the team get down the field and have Nick Folk kick what would be the game winner to give the Jets the 27-24 win. For the numbers, Tyrod Taylor had a 216-yard day with 2 total touchdowns on 57.6% completion. Breece Hall had 19 rushes for 68 yards and a score. Adam Mitchell, think about that. And on a day where Justin Jefferson and Jackson Smith-Njigba respectively held the season in a career low for Jefferson, Mitchell had 102 yards on 8 catches and a touchdown. Okay. Meanwhile, for the Falcons, Kirk Cousins had 234 passing yards and a touchdown on 63.6% completion percentage. Bijan Robinson had 28 total touches for 193 total yards and a rushing touchdown. Kyle Pitts Sr. had 7 receptions for 82 yards. I mean, hey, at least he got the ball. If only this was consistent. If only that was consistent. Hey, shout out to Malachi Moore for the Jets, getting himself a 10-tackle ball game with the TFL. Moving on to the Panthers versus the Rams. Wow. Yes, in post, I saw the catch that Puka Nacua had. It was definitely impressive. Grown man being able to muscle a football off of someone else's hand and into their own without having to rely on using his other arm. No, all he did was cling that shit to his thighs to bring it in. Like, that is insane. And it shows you how physical of a receiver he truly is. It is that part combined with a lot of the other skills that he still has on top of that make him quite the threat as a receiver in the NFL right now. And one of the best. But even in that, it kind of shows you just how the Panthers were doing in this game as well. The Rams thought, with the way that Matthew Stafford had been doing things, they could sling the ball all across the yard without consequences. A man in Matthew Stafford who had not thrown an interception in 10 weeks was promptly, in the first quarter alone, picked off 2 times. Once in the red zone, where he's consistently money at. And then yet again, by Michael Jackson Sr. for what would turn into a pick 6. Their corners were all over it for most of the day. And yes, Matthew Stafford would still eventually get himself those easy, routine, goal line, goal-to-go situation touchdown scores. That was not going to be getting away from him forever, especially when Davante Adams is in the area. They said something like 11 receiving touchdowns in the last 6 games for the man. And even though he's not really getting a lot of yards, the man is literally fucking the most prolific wide receiver in terms of touchdowns in the NFL right now, simply because of that. It's wild, dude. Oh man, you just can't make that up, bro. My gosh, but yeah, just I don't know. Like, we'll say the Rams as well did have some decent rushing efforts from both Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, so that did help them. But this was a game of balance, and even when it felt like the Rams could make a push, the Panthers were right there. Time and time again. Especially on 4th down, where on multiple occasions Bryce Young was able to find, I believe, Jalen Coker, and then eventually Tay Tyrell and McMillan for gain deep on multiple passes for scores in that situation. They also were able to establish the run a little bit, making things somewhat balanced on that front. And when you look at it, it came down to the turnovers. The Rams were able to get back down the field again following that. But Big Derek Brown was able to force Matthew Stafford into a sack fumble, and that would end the game, giving the Panthers the 38-21 win against the Rams. Like, that is so wild to think about. Especially with the surge that the Rams have been hitting. And that's how it ends against the Panthers. It is really special stuff for Carolina when you think about it, I guess. Like, that's just crazy. Like, they were already, by this point, one of the worst teams in the NFL last season. And now, they are literally in position for a playoff spot. Like I said, multiple games against the Bucs are coming up. And when looking at the standings right now, with said win against LA, they are like a half game behind them, it looks like. Or well, by virtue of the fact that the Bucs have played one less game, they still have the lead by percentage. But this can flip so easily. And we were not saying that. Like, yes, the NFC South division was underwhelming overall across the board. But they have a shot. Bryce Young protected the football in this game and had 206 yards on 75% completion with 3 touchdown passes. Jalen Coker had 4 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown. Tyrell McMillan had a lone 43-yard touchdown catch, again, to end the game. And then Chuba Hubbard had 2 receptions for 41 yards and a score. I want to check down on the screen route out of the backfield. Hubbard also had 83 rushing yards on 17 carries, and Rico Donnell had 18 rushes for 58 yards. As for the Rams, Matthew Stafford had 243 passing yards on 64.3% completion and 2 touchdowns and interceptions. Blake Corum had 7 receptions for 81 yards in the score. Kyren Williams had 13 rushes for 72 yards in the score. Xavier Smith had 3 receptions for 82 yards. Puka Nacua had 6 receptions for 72 yards, and Devontae Adams had 4 receptions for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns. Credit to the Ohio State man and Lathan Ransom. Also, for Carolina, getting 11 total tackles in this game, along with a sack in a TFL. The dog. Fucking beast. Straight up. All right, moving on to the Saints and the Dolphins. Like, at least the Dolphins won. Davon Achane had himself a game with 134 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground, along with 22 runs. But the Saints almost made this a game again, completely. For Tagovailoa to play so passive in this one, even with them being down. I mean, how is it that you force the Saints into a situation here where they fumble the ball? You force a sack fumble on Tyler Shuck, and you get the ball back promptly to, on the very next play, have Kool-Aid McKinstry pick you off. Just leaving points on the board at that point. It's like, even when the Dolphins were up 16-0, just think about that. You're up by that much, and you still, against the lowly Saints, managed to allow them to rip off that hatch completely and start making a real stride towards coming back in this ballgame. Things reached a tipping point here to where, I mean, not only did you have this Garrett kicker in Smith get an extremely long field goal in his first NFL action, you then managed to have him following you, barely avoiding the Saints tying up the ball game by getting a pick fucking 2. You then proceed to have the Saints get the onside kick back. Like, the Dolphins actually could have lost this game. At least they came through at the right time, but I don't know about that. Like, that is suspicious, man. Highly. No reason why that should be going down. Anyways, Tyler Shuck in this game for the Saints had 239 passing yards on 68.4% completion with 2 touchdowns and an interception. Honestly, not that terrible, but still. And I guess as a collective, for them to make that comeback is promising, but still not enough to really change their outlook this season. Davon Vele had 8 receptions for 93 yards and a touchdown. Chris Olave had 4 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown. And Jawan Johnson had 5 receptions for 39 yards. Crazy stuff. All right, moving on next to Cardinals Bucks. And why do they keep doing this, man? Why do they keep... what exactly is the game plan? Now, yes, with the Trey McBride touchdown catch, the Cardinals did come back close to winning this, actually. But they themselves would promptly, after forcing a punt, turn the ball over on downs to give the Bucs the win here. This game, as I was kind of tracking it through the ticker and stuff, just was absolutely strange. Like, the Bucs have remained quiet for a while, even with forcing a few mistakes on their front between a missed field goal, having the Cardinals fumble the ball, and then having Jacoby Brissett on literally the first interception throw a pick. And yet, in every single one of those situations, aside from the missed field goal, they did not convert. You had a 17-3 lead, though. It was looking solid. And yet the Cardinals, when they absolutely had to, and were seemingly on their last leg, they just magically found a way to surge right back into it. I'm not sure about that. All that playing from behind consistently leaves the Arizona Cardinals in vulnerable situations, and they would lose yet another one-score game with this drop here. Bucky Irving was back for the Bucs, and he would have a total of 19 touches for 81 yards and a touchdown run. Baker Mayfield had 194 yards passing on 64.3% completion and a touchdown on 27 rushing yards. Chris Godwin Jr. had 3 receptions for 78 yards. Emeka Egbuka had 4 receptions for 42 yards as well. And Dennis, for their defense, had 11 tackles. As for the Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett with 301 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and an interception. Another 40 pass attempt day. Like, again, y'all got this man gunslinging out here. In their rushing attack, even though they probably wouldn't want to rely on the volume with the way they are constructed right now in that backfield. They average for 5 yards a carry, so I guess that's solid. Trey McBride had 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. Robinson Harrison Jr. had 6 receptions for 69 yards. And Michael Carter also added 5 receptions for 47 yards out of the backfield. Craziness, man. Okay. Jags, Titans. Oh boy. Even if the time of possession was somewhat even, please don't be fooled by that. Just don't be. Please. Please. They made Trevor Lawrence look competent as a passer in this game. The Titans defense did. And that would end up being in totality. Like, I don't know. Like, geez, man. You literally let this team belt out to a 15-3 lead with Brendan Strange emerging as a captivating figure at the tight end position, getting himself in the end zone here. You then proceed, in this game alone, to have 7 straight possessions end with no score and 6 consecutive punts between both teams. But you're telling me that the Titans, in getting all those stops, didn't come away with anything a single time. And would proceed to, for the rest of the game, really just let the Jaguars have it their way. Just absolute ineptitude on that front. And again, this is why the Titans are at where they're at. Like, that's not a secret. That's not a surprise to anybody. It's just, damn, like, come on. Like, some has to give at some point. Again, yes, it's not all about the quarterback. And, again, by volume, the Titans didn't have it, but did run for 4.8 yards per carry. Maybe that doesn't factor into the argument, but you still have Cam Ward out here throwing just 3.7 yards per pass attempt. And yes, his completion percentage was somewhat okay, but the results aren't there. And rarely have they been for the team at large. But the Titans can hang their hat on the fact that they did hold the Jaguars' rushing game in check. There was a fair amount of balance here. And I think this is what the Jaguars want. Lawrence was kept at 27 pass attempts. Even with him completing a little less than 60, he himself did not throw an interception, at least. He didn't turn the ball over. And that proved to be enough. Also had 229 passing yards on the day and 2 scores. But their ground game had been their calling card for most of the season. They only managed just 2.6 yards per carry here. At least their front seven, Titans, is still somewhat feared enough to cause that to happen. But everywhere else, they just need some help. Massive help. Jacoby Myers had 6 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. Brenton Strange had 3 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown as well in this game. Moving on to the 49ers and the Browns. That similar thing, honestly. Like Shedeur Sanders is still going to be in a spot if you're in his position where you truly just have a lot to learn. Like it's revealing, yes, that outside of one possession, Brown's offense was virtually a dud. But that wasn't all him, to be honest with you. Yes, his decision-making had been better, probably. I didn't watch the full game live, so I wouldn't have the context there. But you also can't have situations where, as they are trying to drive, you have Harold Fannin Jr. fumble a football that automatically leads to a 49ers score. That kind of stuff just can't happen. You're not going to last in any game like that. Even when it got to that 17-8 score, it still was relatively close for them. Relatively. I mean, Myles Garrett alone is trying his hardest to save the team at times, it feels like. And it's still not enough for them to be in the same ballpark when it comes to competition against other squads. They still lost this game by 18, despite having Myles Garrett by himself get immaculate fucking pressure on the man and post a sack and 2 TFLs along with 5 tackles in this game. Through this, and with that in mind, Myles Garrett. All you got to know is this. His 19 sacks through 12 games is an NFL record, and he is on NFL record pace. The current record is a tie between Michael Strahan and TJ Watt with 22.5 sacks in a single season for a single defensive player. This is 12 games through, and the man is already at 19. And virtually nobody can slow him down. He's going to shatter the record. And already, and even though I am not a gambling man, but you can very much believe that odds for Defensive Player of the Year are shifting in his favor. Honestly, with the pace that he has, there's nothing really stopping him from, in at least one of these next couple games, resetting the record and potentially going on to smash it. That is insane. Yet, they still do not compete. They just don't. And it's a shame that they are wasting quite the career of his. But again, it all goes back to the point of he did choose to stay with this team. Take the high-paying contract. while avoiding going to a contender. He made that decision. But it's still like, dude, oh my gosh. It's insane. 49ers would win 26-8. Brock Purdy had 168 yards passing and a touchdown, 155.2% completion. Christian McCaffrey had a combined 24 touches for 75 yards and a rushing touchdown. George Kittle had 4 receptions for 67 yards. And Jawan Jennings had 4 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, for the Browns, Jerry Sanders had 149 passing yards and a touchdown and 64% completion. John Judkins had 91 yards on 23 carries to lead a 138 rushing yard day for the team. And Harold Fannin Jr. would have 3 receptions and 43 yards and a score in this game. All right. Moving on to the Texans and the Colts. C.J. Stroud was back, and while it was a little touch and go, ultimately his return did not disappoint. What is disappointing is, well, the Colts. Like, you get this hot start, and yet they find themselves in pretty much the same situation they were in last week. Not blowing the Texans out of the water per se, but having their fair share of opportunities to get themselves on the board and try to establish some form of resistance and then ultimately dominance in this game. Instead, they just let the Texans get the hold on them. Even with them having a pick thrown by C.J. Stroud that led to a touchdown, they still had control of the game and would ultimately reclaim it at the very top of the fourth quarter with Nico Collins getting a rushing touchdown. Yes, a rushing touchdown. I guess you got to get competitive. I don't know. And creative with your decision making. That's neither here nor there. Even without watching the game live, it's a solid win for the Texans. It wasn't the prettiest day at the office, but what it does do is give them a slight advantage over the Colts right now. They are only a single game behind them, and this AFC South race, all of a sudden, is getting a little more intriguing. Like, I'm pretty sure the Colts have another game against the Texans coming up. Yeah, they do to end off the year. So they're going to have to see this team again. And, I mean, the rushing attack for them was okay. It's not superhuman numbers from Jonathan Taylor here in this game. But at the very least, you know, he was efficient on the ground. Yet, it felt like when the game was on the line, and maybe the Texans with their front seven, like that defense is just tremendous. So there's a good chance they weren't allowing it. But you put the ball in the hands of Daniel Jones to make it happen. And he proceeds to complete just 51.9% of his passes in this game for 201 yards. Yeah, he got 2 touchdown passes, but no. As for the other numbers, Alec Pierce had 4 receptions for 78 yards and a touchdown. Josh Downs had 2 receptions for 44 yards, and the score is 2 receptions for 44 yards. As for the Texans, Nico Collins had 5 receptions for 98 yards. Jaden Higgins had 5 receptions for 65 yards. And Dalton Schultz had 7 receptions for 55 yards. Zaire Franklin for the Colts had a 13-tackle day at the office, but it would prove not to be enough. Damn. All right. Then the Chargers and the Raiders. Why say it like that? Why even bother saying it like that? Does this Raiders team really strike fear in anybody's heart? I didn't think so. I didn't think so. Look, again, this game was not watched live for me. I don't have all the context. But even with them shortening this up to 24-14, at a reasonable point in the fourth quarter, off an impressive Brock Bowers catch, by the way. Did you really think that the game was close? Chances are you probably didn't. And if you did, you're probably lying. Probably lying. Like, although those Brock Bowers catches are sick, the Raiders is still the fucking Raiders. They still can't run the damn ball. They still can't run the damn ball. You want to know how crazy this sounds? The Chargers overall had 192 yards on the ground and 2 touchdown runs on 4.5 yards per carry. Kamani Vidal, by himself, had 7 more rushes than the entire Raiders offense combined and had almost 4.2 yards, or 4.2 times the yards that the Raiders offense had as a whole in 31. Ashton Jeanty himself managed to get just 2.1 yards per carry. It goes back to that offensive line. It goes back to it. Because, nigga, we know that Ashton Jeanty is far better than that. But it does also go to show you that, again, the problem last year for the Raiders, the running backs might have been a little weaker. That's for damn sure. Talking about fucking Zamir White and Sincere McCormick getting snaps in the NFL. Probably not your best recipe for success. But that offensive line, man, like, they gotta go. Especially the center. I gotta do another, ballot for Pro Bowl voting. They have the nerve to have that guy up there. He shouldn't even be a potential selection on the fucking list. He cannot run block to save his life. And he's supposed to be protecting the very middle of the line. Every single time. His man's already got him beat. As soon as he looks up. Already barreling past him into the backfield to stuff Ashton Jeanty again. That's how this goes with him. It's not, they need to retool the entire thing. And it may not be something that can be fixed in one whole off season. Fair enough, but you got to get some pieces in order or something, because this has got to change. I'll tell you, man. Brock Bowers would have 4 receptions for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns to lead the Raiders and all wide receivers in the game. Justin Herbert had 151 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception on 75% completion. Didn't even really need to do all that much. Jarrett Patterson had 11 rushes for 54 yards and a touchdown. Think about that. Jarrett Patterson, the former commander himself, could do that in relief behind the Chargers' offensive line that, ironically enough, is missing several key players between the likes of Slater and Alt on the outside. And yet they are still running laps around you as a rushing offense. That is absolutely embarrassing. Because that Raiders lineup, that is their starting rotation of linemen. I don't believe that anyone there has suffered an injury, per se. They are fully healthy and ready to go. And that's the best they can. But hey, when you're out that much defensively, you're going to have some pretty solid performances. For the Raiders, Jeremy Chin had 17 sacks, while Devin White had 11. Max Crosby had 9 total tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 TFLs. So credit to those guys. And yet that was still put to waste somewhat. As for the Chargers, Tuipulotu had 6 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 TFLs also, along with a pass deflection. And that will do it for all the game action. But to get into some of the developments now from the week, I already touched on that, but Terrell Bernard, the linebacker, was also out for the Bills match against the Steelers with an injury. Alvin Kamara would be out with a knee injury. Frank Ragnow would be sent back into retirement. There were medical discrepancies and issues found in his physical that were not addressed and prevented him from being able to formally sign with the team. So that ended up falling through. What could have been a tremendous reinforcement for the Lions down the stretch of the season now is literally not going to happen anymore. It would be detailed by NFL, sources overall, and an article on their site that they incorrectly cited the death of former Lions cornerback Lem Barney, who is currently a Hall of Famer in that organization. This happened on Saturday, and as they put the post out, they had other sources, as this article states right here. The Detroit Free Press reported on that day, Saturday, that it had spoken to Barney's son, who confirmed that Lem Barney was alive. End quote. With a number of different situations we've been hearing about. Like, those are things that have to be taken seriously, of course. So I'm sure that it was an honest accident, but you gotta be careful. Double check, triple check what you're talking about, especially when it comes to, man, hearing news like that can be tremendously devastating. At least they were able to reach out to the person involved closely in the matter and get the right context. Because, man, if that would have been out for any more time without truly getting a sense of what's going on in that situation, that could have been very tragic, to say the least. All right. Sauce Gardner would be designated as week to week with a calf strain. And the Broncos would also sign Elijah Moore from their practice squad. Meanwhile, we got Eagles fans just, yes, they're salty. Maybe they aren't in the right headspace. Maybe they aren't in the right headspace. Because it's one thing to acknowledge that you are in a pretty sucky situation right now, especially when you look at what their offense has been doing. But there is still no room for something like this to go down. Comical as it may seem, honestly, it's not. It's a damn shame that you would have people go out of their way to do something like this. But per Tim McManus, in an initial report, quote, the New Jersey home of Eagles offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo was vandalized with eggs early Saturday morning, according to the Morristown Police Department. Video surfaced on social media of multiple people appearing to throw objects at Patullo's home. Online posts suggested it was rocks being thrown, but a Morristown police representative clarified that it was eggs, adding that the investigation is still ongoing. End quote. What the fuck? What? Like, seriously? Like, you are actively infringing on this man's property, desecrating it with eggshells and yolk to try to publicly embarrass him. All because of a game? That's just, like, that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I understand the passion, especially when it comes to the hardcore fans out there. But man, even then, like, you have to know your limits and know your boundaries, dude. That is way, way, way too much. Not to mention as well, as this quote from the Sporting News states, on one end, this was posted to TikTok. Like, you're doing this for what? What exactly is the goal? You're trying to get attention at the expense of another person's overall peace. Not to mention, later on in the article, it states that Patullo and his family were home during the vandalism. End quote. Like, if you have your own gripes with him doing his job in a somewhat lackluster way, if you want to approach it like that, fine, honestly. But take that up with him. Go in person if you must and take it up with him. Why are you involving his family in this situation? Why are you even coming anywhere near that line? Like, even if they're not directly out there, they are also, again, actively in the home trying to do whatever it is they have to do. And because of your own deluded thoughts, you just want to infringe on their right to reside peacefully in that space. Just because of some silly shit like that. By comparison, it's not worth it. And for Patullo specifically, there would be different articles mentioning that I did not read through. But even he alluded to the fact, like, okay, I get it. It's not going the way that you want it to go. Understandable. You know, he admits that he's got to be better. Sirianni's admitted that he's got to be better. But Patullo himself has to go out there and say, okay, this is too far. Way too fucking far. Any number of other things could have jumped off at that point, if they were willing to take it there, just because you didn't win a fucking game on Black Friday. Like, it's just one of the silliest things I've ever seen. Like, oh man, it's horrible. I hope they do figure out who actually did that. They should be held very much responsible for it. And again, hell, I'll take it a step further. Line all of them up to go see Patullo in person instead of acting like cowards. If you're that willing to infringe on his space already and violate that, you may as well take out all these supposed frustrations that you want to at least purport to have. If you're posting it to social media instantly for some form of virality, trying to make it blow up. Like, you're putting yourself in a bit of a contradicting state there. Like, are you actually actively upset with this, or are you trying to feign that for some clout? Just admit it. And again, at the expense of all that, just for some fucking internet fame, you want to put them in a vulnerable situation. I'm not going to say necessarily in danger per se, but they may not take it as such. And you'd have to at least understand that to an extent. But then again, they probably don't give a shit. They probably don't. They got to learn their lesson some way. The Colts would waive kicker Michael Badgley. The Steelers would sign Adam Thielen. After he was waived from the Vikings, he requested to be cut. And they would also waive Darius Slay Jr. Honestly, that just sucks from that perspective. The fact that they already were so tired of the cycle with Slay Jr., his play hadn't necessarily been all that convincing for them to keep him anyways. But him cycling in and out of the lineup with injuries did not help his case. You know, with age, that can't always be controlled, but it made him an expendable commodity. For them to get Adam Thielen out of this while having a free roster spot, I mean, it could be interesting. It's a very solid number 2 option. And hell, I mean, you know, after being rivals for this much time, Aaron Rodgers and Thielen get to be teammates. I don't know how much pressure it'd take off of DK Metcalf necessarily, but at the very least, it'll give you another reliable option to look at through the air. And I think the value there is going to be enough for this to work. It's not worth a whole lot as well. Could the Steelers have gotten somebody better earlier? Yes. Hell yes. But with everything that's gone down to this point, with the people left on the market, and with the options that you truly had, this was probably one of the better routes you could take. You're trying to keep it cheap. Thanksgiving Day would be highly viewed. I think the average of all the games, around 44 million, was the most for any Thanksgiving Day trio of games in the history of the festivity. It's also marked heavily by the fact that Cowboys and Chiefs became the single most watched broadcast of a game on television in history, at 57.2 million average viewers concurrently. So, I mean, it's safe to say, from that standpoint, it was a success there. I think the next step is to try to figure out, okay, what were the results of the Black Friday game? So I can, like, they may, yeah, they're just, okay, they're just talking about Thanksgiving. I do wonder what the Black Friday results would be, though. That's the next step. So, okay. Fair enough. Darius Slay Jr. would promptly be picked up by Buffalo. I really don't even know how much that does for them. I mean, like, they already tried to have a bit of a reclamation project going, if you could call it that, with having Trey White come back. Do they really need room for 2 of those situations? I'm not really sure. Ravens signed Mark Andrews to a 3-year, $39.3 million contract extension. Fair enough. The man has recently become one of the most accomplished receivers, period, in Ravens history. And say what you want about some of his shortcomings, but at the same time, with all that he's done there already, it would be very easy to picture him retiring a Raven at this point of time. He's already, like, he was one of the older rookies in that class, and he's still doing the best he can in his prime. His game has never been relying on speed. He just brings down the catches, at least in theory. He brings down the catches more often than not. That's frankly all you need right now. And I guess the situation for the Ravens apparently likely is a person that could be on the verge of leaving, depending on how other contract extensions and negotiations with other more valued players, I should say. It really depends on how much they invest or are willing to invest in, likely. You do want a change of pace tight end who can offer you a bit more speed. Charlie Kolar has gotten a few looks this season. He is more of a blocker. He is definitely not that. The Mitchell Payton person that they also, I don't even think he made the final roster, but I know he for sure was a blocker too. So it's just stuff that they have to go around. This is the most consistent tight end you have. So it isn't hard to see why they would keep him as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown, despite dealing with an ankle injury, is actually questionable for the game later on, as of the recording of this video. And also, to cap it off, not necessarily to minimize anything, but to give its respect and have a brief follow-up to the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame report and one of the early recaps this season. Essentially, they have just announced their 2026 class as of a few days ago, and it consists of just 3 players in former Bengals linebacker and Dolphins linebacker Ray Maluga, former tight end, former Jags player Chad Owens. This article also mentions that he didn't spend a lot of time in the NFL, but was actually a hell of a player in the CFL, Hall of Famer there as well, and was a 2-time Grey Cup champion, along with being a 4-time All-Star and the 2012 CFL Most Outstanding Player. He is also there. And also, for the third player, Brandon Manumaluna, tight end in St. Louis, San Diego, and also Chicago. Career numbers may not jump off the page, and frankly, I would not know. I was not around at this time. I wasn't watching football at this time. And I hadn't even when you go back and look at me watching old highlights, this was not a player that I was accustomed to seeing. In fact, I am more familiar with Maluga. Watching a few games with him on the defensive side, making a reasonable impact. He had a solid NFL career for sure. But yes, between what they have all contributed on and off the field as players of Polynesian descent, they are now deservedly being honored by a committee consisting of a number of really intriguing people. Honestly, I read this and I did not know that some of these people were on the committee. But you know what? The way in which they operated, as this quote states right here, in addition to the selection committee, all living Polynesian Football Hall of Fame inductees cast votes to select the class. End quote. You can't have the process in a much better way. Even if this committee might have their own thoughts about it at the same time, you can't really make a wrong decision if you have the men in the hall themselves putting their own ballots in it. That'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.